Today from the global lane, the world's top violators of religious freedom.
It is the United States saying, we believe religious freedom is so important, we want to make it a part of every relationship we have with other countries.
U.S. federal police weaponized by the Chinese to silence an American advocate for persecuted Uyghur ethnics.
I was approached by Secret Service and arrested for, alleged terrorism, and was subsequently interrogated by the FBI.
Baby formula shortages and rising prices. Buckle your belts. More hardship may be coming.
Come the summer, we're looking at a 10% inflation rate, mostly because we're about to have a crisis with food.
And this Memorial Day, remembering service and sacrifice. And it's all right here on the global lane. Religious freedom and the worst violators around the globe. Many people believe the U.S. State Department made a big error last year when it omitted Nigeria from the list of countries of particular concern. Will Nigeria be back on the list this year? What other religious freedom violators should get our attention? Well, Todd Nettleton is with VOM. He's a radio host and chief of media relations at the Voice of the Martyrs. Good to have you with us again, Todd. So which countries are expected to be among those of particular concern this year in the State Department report? Those, of course, considered to be the most severe violators of religious freedom.
There are currently 10 countries on that list of countries of particular concern. I think with the report this year, the big ones to watch are India and Nigeria. Both of them have been recommended as countries of particular concern by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Now we'll see what the State Department does with those recommendations, and we'll see whether they really fix that label to them. The other one that I think will almost certainly become a country of particular concern is Afghanistan. With the Taliban back in charge there, I don't see how it won't be a country of particular concern, especially with some of the things we've seen even in the last few months with related to burqas, with related to girls going to school. Clearly, the Taliban is back up to its old tricks.
So tell me a little bit more about that, India. Why do you think India needs to be on the list?
Well, India is a country that is led by Prime Minister Modi, who came out of the Hindu nationalist background. His government wants every Indian to be a Hindu. And if you're not a Hindu, you should become one, or you should find a different place to live. That affects our Christian brothers and sisters there, but it also affects millions of Muslims in India. Obviously, though, India is a country that we do a lot of trade with. There's a lot of commercial interests back and forth between our two countries. And it'll be interesting to see if the State Department is willing to offend the Indian government by saying they're a country of particular concern on religious freedom, or if they put those sort of trade relationships ahead of religious freedom and sort of let it go by.
And they were hesitant to do that with Nigeria last year, but this year it'll probably be back on. Which countries do you think should be considered countries of particular concern, those that may not be given this designation this year?
The one that wasn't on the list that I was concerned about was Mozambique. Northern Mozambique is a place where Christians are under attack by radical Islamists. It is a place where pastors have been killed, Christians have been killed, and it is not on the list. It's not on the recommended list. And the group, the radical Islamist group there, is not even on the recommendation for entities of particular concern. That's one I thought they missed in this year's report.
Now, Todd, several years ago, Vietnam altered its behavior a bit when it was listed as a country of particular concern. But then once the designation was removed, it resumed violating religious freedom. So what difference does this annual State Department report really make for persecuted Christians around the world?
I think if you're a Christian in prison in China or Iran, it really doesn't make a difference for you. But it does make a difference at the government level. And it makes a difference that the United States is saying religious freedom is so important to us, we want to make it a part of our international relations. We want to make it a part of our diplomatic process to talk about religious freedom, to talk about getting people out of prison who are in prison unjustly because of their religion. This is such a significant thing. We're going to make it a part of our conversations. Now, even after the State Department makes these designations, the administration has a lot of leeway in how they use that, whether they put on sanctions, whether they really put teeth behind these designations. But I think the significance of it is the United States saying, we believe religious freedom is so important. We want to make it a part of every relationship we have with other countries. We at least want that to be an issue that's on the table for discussion. Well, then, how satisfied are you with the Biden administration response to persecution and its commitment to global religious freedom thus far? What more could be done, Todd? You know, one of the things that's a challenge, it's one of the reasons I'm thankful that I'm not an elected office holder, is, you know, you have to balance all of these things. And we saw that with the Trump administration. We see that with the Biden administration as well. Hey, we want to talk about religious freedom, but we also want this. We also want to have these trade relationships. And so I think every administration could do more. And Christians as well, right? We should do more. Absolutely. We need to let our elected officials know this is something we care about. This is something we think about when we go into the ballot box. We also need to act through our prayers. We need to be regularly praying for our persecuted brothers and sisters around the world. You know, ultimately, persecution is not a government issue. It's a spiritual issue. And we need to recognize that. And we need to fight in the spiritual battle through our prayers. Okay, VOM's Todd Nettleton, thanks for being with us, and congratulations, Todd, on winning this year's ECPA Book Award in the Biography and Memoir category for your book, When Faith is Forbidden, 40 Days on the Front Lines with Persecuted Christians. Thanks so much, Gary. It's always good to be with you. In Japan this week, President Biden said the United States would intervene militarily if China invades Taiwan. But what about protecting Americans from the communist Chinese right here on the home front? We're learning more about the 2018 arrest of one of the main voices for the Uyghur people here in the USA. Last January, the Department of Justice dropped its case against Salih Udayar, but he's only now able to talk about it. Udayar is the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile. He's here to explain, along with Daily Caller investigative reporter Philip Lenzicki, who has reported on this case. Salih, let's begin with you. This involves a communist Chinese agent who weaponized the U.S. criminal justice system, accusing you of being a spy. Tell us why you were arrested and interrogated by the FBI back in September 2018. And I guess it wasn't a cordial interrogation, was it?
No, unfortunately, it wasn't. Back in June of 2018, I had spearheaded the East Turkestan National Awakening movement and led demonstrations in front of the U.S. Capitol, calling on the U.S. Congress and the U.S. government to recognize the genocide and pass legislative bills to address, the ongoing genocide in East Turkestan. Shortly afterwards, this woman who I suspect is a Chinese spy arrived, trying to initially, asking me how much it would cost to buy me off. Then when I said I wasn't for sale, she, vaguely threatened my family, stating that China is powerful and they can harm me if I continue to doing this. Then on July 11th of 2018, this individual came to our office claiming that she had a meeting with someone else. Then she, began to, make inappropriate gestures and comments, stating that, oh, I heard you don't have a girlfriend. She, touched my hand and asked, oh, I want to help you, all this type of things. And I told her to leave. But it wasn't until September 12th that while I was peacefully demonstrating in front of the White House that I was approached by Secret Service and arrested for, alleged terrorism, and was subsequently interrogated by the FBI after being, handcuffed for hours in an underground location.
Philip, you did some investigative reporting on this. So what did you find out about Salih's accuser?
What we've found from the court records was that this individual claimed to be a volunteer at the time for an organization not connected with Mr. Udayar. But a lot of other information we're still trying to dig up at this time.
Well, I must remind our viewers, Sally, that you're one of the main voices right here in the United States, an American citizen, and you've been a voice for as many as 3 million Uyghur people who have been rounded up, imprisoned by the Chinese, sent to forced labor and re-education camps. Now, the BBC just published hacked police files documenting thousands of cases. And Sally, you were among the first to call this genocide. So what did the FBI say to you when you explained that that's why your accuser, a Chinese agent, was trying to silence you?
Well, I mean, they didn't believe me. In fact, this was in September 2018. Nobody except for me was calling it a genocide. Nobody was, focusing on the fact that millions of Uyghurs were in the concentration camps. So they, kind of like laughed it off and almost in a way, mocked me for calling it as such. And I think now that they have learned that, I was telling the truth.
This is just unbelievable that they could have been co-opted by a suspected Chinese agent to go after you and look at you as a potential terrorist. Philip, I know the case was dropped by the DOJ. What did they say about dropping it last January? What did you find out?
As far as we can tell, there was no explanation given when they dropped this case. We inquired into the circumstances, but so far we've not been told anything about that, unfortunately. It doesn't really seem to make much sense when there's such a strong public interest in this case in light of the fact that this could be an example of Chinese intelligence operations operating within our capital.
And Sally, it is shocking that you were arrested based on the testimony of one witness, a suspected Chinese agent at that. So what would you like to see happen now? And what do you make of these prisoner photos that the BBC has just released?
Well, firstly, we call on the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence to investigate this matter, to, explain, answer these questions as who, gave this, authority, or who urged, the Secret Service to arrest me on, the charges of terrorism. And why did it take 3.5 years for a misdemeanor case? Now, coming back to the BBC report, I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this shows thousands of photos of Uyghurs in the concentration camps, which the Chinese government claims that, they're re-education camps and they are voluntarily, students attending these facilities. These photos show that it's quite the contrary. In fact, you have, one detainee who is, chained up and, has a bag over his head, being surrounded by at least 7-8 armed personnel, Chinese security personnel. So this is something that the UN, while it's in East Turkestan, needs to investigate this, and the international community needs to break their silence and act before it's too late.
Okay, Sally Udayar and Philip Linzicki, our thanks to both of you today for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Paying their fair share, tax the rich to lower inflation? The president and some members of Congress say Americans will experience less inflationary pressure if only taxes are raised on the top wage earners, millionaires and billionaires. So what's the truth? Here to set us straight is Dr. Michael Bussler, public policy analyst and professor of finance at New Jersey's Stockton University. Dr. Bussler, it's always good to talk with you. So this idea of raising taxes on the wealthy is nothing new, but what's the truth here?
Well, and thanks for having me. As you know, it's my pleasure to be here. That's exactly wrong. And if you raise the taxes on the wealthy, not only won't you reduce inflation, you'll actually make it worse. Now, why do I say that? Because they have less money to save and invest. That's less capital going into capital markets. We already have a capital shortage because the federal government is $31.5 trillion in debt. But if it leads to a capital shortage, that makes inflation worse.
Let's talk about baby formula shortages. That's a big issue. Other supply chain issues. Is this just a temporary crisis, in your opinion, or is it the new norm for America?
Well, the baby shortage problem should have never happened. The FDA had a problem with Abbott Labs production facility back in February. And here it is May, and it's not reopened yet. So obviously that's going to create a shortage. The FDA, if there is a problem, look, we like the FDA to do their job, but let's fix it as quickly as possible. They didn't do that. We have a shortage. Now we have to go to Europe and ask them for some of theirs. They'll give some. It won't be enough to alleviate the shortage. It'll help a little bit, but it won't alleviate the shortage. Government has got to learn to be more efficient. They have a function to serve, and they're supposed to protect us, and we understand that. However, if there's a problem, it's got to be fixed within warp speed time and not dragging the supply chain out as long as it has. We have other supply chain issues, mostly due to the transportation problem in the U.S. Truck drivers and warehouses are filling up with goods that we can't deliver. We need to encourage business to make more, not add more regulations to business, not raise the corporate income tax from 21 to 28%. All of those things will tend to reduce supply and make the supply chain problems worse.
So do you think a recession is coming? How bad will it be?
I'll tell you, there's virtually a 0% chance we can avoid recession. Why do I say that? And this is all brought on by government, fiscal, and monetary policy. The Federal Reserve's goals are supposed to be price stability, keep inflation low, full employment, keep unemployment low, and growth in the economy. For the last year or so, they've abandoned those goals in favor of social goals, trying to cure real or perceived social injustices, and worried about climate change. Clearly, we had a problem the beginning of 2021. The Federal Reserve should have stopped their bond buying program and stopped keeping interest rates near zero. And shockingly, they waited until March of this year to start raising interest rates. Even though they went up a quarter and then a half a point, they're still near zero, or at least 1%. That low interest rate encourages excess demand in the economy. Now, why do I say that? So look at the housing market. I said, look, builders build 100 houses, put up a sign, $200,000, 150 people show up. Why are there so many people showing up? Because people said last year, I can get a mortgage at 2.5%, and the federal government in the last 2 years handed out free money to everybody. So now I have enough money for the down payment. I wasn't going to buy a house, but this is the best time to do it. So hundreds of thousands of people went into the housing market, and housing prices went up 15-20% a year. Same thing with cars. All of that excess demand led to car prices going sky high. And when the new car prices went sky high, the used car prices went up right after that. So the Federal Reserve waited too long. Now they're going to have to get extremely aggressive. They're going to, in my view, they're going to raise the interest rates at least 0.5% in June, at least 0.5% in July, and probably another 0.5% 4 or 5 times for the rest of the year. That will be too late to reduce the inflation problem. We're running inflation about 8.5% now. Come the summer, we're looking at a 10% inflation rate, mostly because we're about to have a crisis with food. Farmers are telling me how much money they're spending for fertilizer and diesel fuel, which is killing them, and they can't get labor, so they have to raise wages to get more people to work. So the cost to produce is going sky high for them. As a result, they're going to have to recover that in the price. Adding to that, Russia invaded Ukraine. About 25% of the world's wheat supply is made over there. We're going to end up with a shortage of food. The U.S. will complain, hey, we're paying so much more for food. Where it's really going to hurt is the less than developed countries who can't pay more for the food, and we could run into some large starvation issues. So we're looking at high inflation for the rest of this year. And if the Federal Reserve gets very aggressive with interest rates and the economy starts to stagnate, and remember the first quarter of this year, we already had negative GDP growth. If the economy starts to stagnate, we end up with a condition we haven't seen since the Carter years called stagflation, which a year ago I said that's likely to happen if the Federal Reserve doesn't act quickly. I'm worried about not just a recession, but also a recession and keeping inflation high. And that's a stagflation problem, which is extremely difficult to solve.
Well, buckle your belts. We may be in for a long haul here, for a tough one. Dr. Michael Bussler, thank you for setting us straight with those insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. My pleasure. Look forward to doing it again.
Memorial Day is a time when the people of the United States remember and honor those who died while serving in the U.S. military. The tradition began in 1868, shortly after the Civil War, and was observed annually on May 30th. The day was known as Decoration Day because veterans and loved ones decorated the graves of the fallen. In 1971, Congress changed the name to Memorial Day and set the annual observance for the last Monday in May. We Americans also celebrate the longer Memorial Weekend as the kickoff of summer. But let's not forget why we celebrate. Millions of brave Americans paid the ultimate price, sacrificed their lives so we could enjoy this holiday and every day as a free people. From Bunker Hill to the beaches of Normandy and the alleys of Fallujah, American servicemen and women knew the true meaning of sacrifice. So did the firefighters, police officers, and emergency medical personnel who perished in New York on 9/11. And if you're my age or older, you may remember back in 1961, when President John F. Kennedy said this during his inaugural address.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
6 decades later, we live in a time when many of us ask the government to solve our problems and do for us. Would you like another stimulus check? Well, if we're to turn things around, we must restore a reverence for godly values like forgiveness, civility, service, and sacrifice. Reflect and ask yourself, how am I serving my country? What sacrifices am I making in service to others? After Jesus served his disciples by washing their feet, he told them that greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And that he did out of love for all of us. So this Memorial Day, take time to think about sacrifice. Let's remember those who served and gave everything for us, so we may live our lives free from tyranny. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on the CBN News and NRB channels, social media, and our broadcast affiliates. And until next time, be blessed.